So, you've decided to turn me into a cuckold, I repeated, staring at my fiancée Anna, still unable to believe what I had just heard from her. I was in shock. No, in truth, I was utterly confused. This was a moment that changed my entire life. Nothing had prepared me for what had just happened. Only a few minutes ago, we were enjoying our usual Sunday breakfast, and I distinctly remembered my last thought: how lucky I am that Anna accepted my proposal of marriage. Sure, she could be a bit eccentric at times, but until now, I hadn't seen anything terribly wrong with that. Now, however, I was holding a cooling cup of coffee in my right hand, forgotten and ignored, while desperately trying to process the absurdity of what she had just said. But Tom, darling, when you speak like that, it sounds so unkind and harsh, Anna remarked reproachfully, giving me a pointed look. Cuckold is such a dirty, demeaning word, she added, wrinkling her delicate nose slightly. You won't be a cuckold, darling, on the contrary. You'll become a hero, a man who gets a unique opportunity to prove his strength and confidence, while also demonstrating the depth of his love and devotion to me. It seemed my fiancée was truly inspired as she shared the opportunities unfolding before us, her words flowing like a relentless, unstoppable stream. You are the love of my life, and nothing will ever change that. I could never imagine taking off this wonderful ring, she said, holding up her hand with fingers splayed to show off my gift. And I will absolutely marry you, just as we planned. Processing such news wasn't easy. It seemed there was no need for further discussion at that moment. Anna had clearly and firmly expressed her desires. This single conversation had already drastically altered both our lives and our relationship. She had issued a challenge, demanding that I prove my love for her. So what now? Do I still love her? Do I accept this challenge? And if I do, would that even be a bad thing? Could there be some kind of motivation in it for me as well? Maybe I should give it a try. There had to be something thrilling about this strange concept for the man being cheated on, otherwise, it wouldn't happen so often as she had claimed. So, what was so appealing about it? Well, there's only one way to find out, right? I decided to question my fiancée further and learn more about how this idea had taken root in her mind. I understand what you're suggesting, or rather, demanding, I said carefully. May I ask what brought about this sudden change in behavior? This is Tina. Anna began enthusiastically, clearly interpreting my reaction as a sign that I wasn't entirely opposed to the idea. You see, Tina tried this with Mark some time ago. At first, he was against it, but he quickly softened and got into it. After a while, he started really enjoying this dynamic. Mark? Seriously? The self-proclaimed alpha male, Mark? So becoming a cuckold really must have some appeal, assuming, of course, that she was telling the truth. However, that hardly seemed to matter now, since it looked like I'd be experiencing it for myself soon enough. Sitting across the table, Anna beamed with a broad smile, clearly convinced that she had already won me over with her irresistible feminine charm. And while I'd always admired her charm, it felt like I was seeing an entirely new, previously unknown side of my loving fiancé. Mark? Seriously? I never would have guessed, I replied, carefully avoiding any mention of my own feelings about this revelation. After all, I wasn't entirely sure how I felt about it yet. It doesn't make him any less of a man, she continued, nodding with conviction, unwavering in her stance. The sheer joy she radiated from the anticipation of her success was almost infectious. Quite the opposite. I think it shows just how mature and self-confident he is, and how much he loves and trusts Tina. And most importantly, it's really spiced up their sex life. Anna's eyes practically sparkled with excitement. Wow! I exclaimed in surprise. So, they're still doing this? No, they stopped when she gave birth to their first child. My fiancé replied with a hint of regret. Anna, this could change our relationship forever. Have you thought this through? Are you absolutely sure about this? I think so, she pretended to ponder for a few brief seconds. Yes, I'm sure, she declared firmly with an energetic nod. This is a serious decision that could fundamentally alter our relationship. I warned her once again, just to be sure. Oh, come on, she said with a sly smile. It's just a little harmless fun for a while. After that, we'll go back to being a normal couple and look back on this thrilling chapter of our lives with joy. Can I ask, have you already made up your mind, or are you just suggesting this? I asked, seeking clarity. Tom, I really do love you, and I know this isn't something you want to do, she said, tilting her head with understanding. But yes, it's decided. I need this experience, and honestly, I've already started taking steps toward it yesterday. Well, you see, Roberto can be very persuasive. As she said this, Anna's gaze turned dreamy and nostalgic. What? Roberto? Who was Roberto? I asked, growing increasingly uneasy as I looked at her. You have nothing to worry about, darling, she said dismissively, waving her hand in the air. Yes, he's very handsome, but so are you. He's charming and great in bed, but in that regard, he doesn't compare to you. It's just that this whole cuckold situation makes sex with him so incredibly hot and mind-blowing. Roberto is very experienced. He's done this for others before, including Mark and Tina. Can you believe it? It helped them so much, she exclaimed excitedly. I'll bet it did. I replied dryly. She furrowed her brow slightly for a moment, but chose to ignore my less than enthusiastic reaction. In any case, we just knew you'd come around to it. I know how strong and confident you are, how much you love me, and how open you usually are to unconventional ideas, Anna said, giving me a meaningful wink and a subtle smile. Maybe I rushed things a bit, she admitted, but we didn't see anything wrong with seizing the opportunity as soon as it presented itself. Unbelievable, I muttered that it was all too much at once for me to process. I felt overwhelmed by a storm of intense and conflicting emotions over everything she had just dumped on me. So, what are the rules? I asked. That was, admittedly, not the smartest question to ask, but it was the only one that came to mind. Well, of course, Roberto will be having sex with me, she said with a giggle, as if amused by the absurdity of my question. No love or tenderness involved, just raw, intense sex. That's the whole point of this game, she explained matter-of-factly. I see, I said, scratching behind my ear. And what about me? What role will I have in all this, aside from being the cuckolded fiancé? Roberto doesn't mind if I continue giving you attention in a certain way, she said with a smile, as if offering me something special. But now there are strict rules, no close contact, and you're no longer allowed to bring me pleasure. I know it sounds strange, but those are his conditions, and he's confident it's the right way. Anna raised her eyebrows in an elaborate gesture and slightly puffed out her lips. For me, of course, this is a big sacrifice since I love having sex with you, but I've decided to go through with it. Naturally, when it comes to sex, he'll be using me however he wants. Really? You've never wanted to? Yes, I know, she interrupted with a faint grimace of embarrassment. We've never tried that. I'm still not thrilled about it, but, apparently, it's very important to Roberto. Wow. I see. I mumbled that in truth, I never understood some men's fascination with anal sex, so this additional detail didn't mean much to me. Anna knew me well, perfectly aware that I needed time to process this new information. Now, she was once again waiting patiently for my reaction. So, this will only last for a limited time? I asked her finally. After a long pause of deliberation, she practically jumped with joy and threw her arms around me. Assuming I had agreed to her proposal, I knew it, she squealed triumphantly. I knew you'd want to try this. You're simply the best. Oh, Tom, from now on, I'm going to call you Tommy instead of Tom, okay? It's an essential part of the cuckold game. Well, okay. Truth be told, I'd never liked that name. But hey, it was part of the role, wasn't it? Can we at least have sex one last time? I asked my fiancé. Oh no, Tommy, Anna said, wagging her finger in the air with mock disapproval. I'm so sorry, but Roberto strictly forbade it. Our game has already begun, and from this moment on, you are officially a cuckold. That's your role to play, and I need to make sure everything goes according to plan, she explained, letting out a small giggle. I see, I replied. A few hours later, I reluctantly opened the front door to find a man standing there, presumably Roberto. As soon as he walked through the door, he extended his hand to me, a wide grin plastered across his face. I ignored the gesture, simply stepping aside to let him in. He seemed a bit surprised by this, but quickly regained his composure, his smug smile returning almost instantly. Well, at least I felt like I had scored a small point in my favor, no matter how insignificant it might have been. But then I remembered why I was here and the role I was supposed to play in this bizarre quest. Here and now, I wasn't meant to score points, or much less, to win. My duty was to be the cuckold and to lose. I realized this was a far more complex task, one that would take some time for me to adjust it. I thought the whole purpose of this ordeal was to make me feel humiliated and burn with jealousy. And as I watched Anna rush into the hallway to greet Roberto with a deep, passionate kiss, well, that image fulfilled every one of my expectations. God, how it hurt. I felt my eyes begin to water, my emotions, locked deep inside, clashing wildly between anger, resentment, humiliation, and, most surprisingly, perusal. All of it swirled together inside me with overwhelming intensity. Anna had described Roberto as a handsome and charming man. Well, I couldn't exactly assess his charm right now, but he mostly came across as arrogant. Maybe that was the very trait Anna found appealing about him. What truly puzzled me was the appearance of this so-called alpha male. I've always struggled to judge other men's attractiveness, but this stallion struck me as surprisingly ordinary and even unattractive. Come to think of it, he didn't look remotely like a stereotypical Latin American. I wondered if Roberto was just a deliberately made-up pseudonym. This guy looked more like your average Walter or Michael, someone who could easily blend into a crowd without standing out. He was a bit shorter than me, definitely far less muscular, and the rest of his physique was far from resembling the proportions of Apollo. Honestly, I was almost disappointed. I had expected to see a towering, dominant, brutish type of man, not some scrawny accountant with a receding hairline and thinning hair. But hey, this was supposed to be a game, wasn't it? Something that played out exclusively in the minds of those participating. So appearance probably wasn't all that important. What really mattered was the internal dynamic between Anna and me, while this guy was merely a tool in the whole process. I was still absorbing all these new impressions, sensations, and realizations with curiosity. Of course, I wouldn't say I was enjoying the situation, but it was definitely fascinating, and although I was far from being an adrenaline junkie, I felt more alive right now than I had in a long time. Everything unfolding before me was as thrilling as I had anticipated, just not entirely in a positive way. While I was lost in thought, Anna hobbled past me in unfamiliar, obviously newly purchased red Louboutin heels with high stilettos. She held Roberto's hand, leading him toward our bedroom. Until today, I had never seen my fiancée wear anything like that, and honestly, they looked quite awkward on her. Sure, some women walk in heels as effortlessly as if they were sneakers, and their legs look stunningly elegant. What can I say? Anna was clearly not one of them. As she walked by, I noticed a white tag sticking out from her evidently new black lace underwear, peeking up along her spine. Her unsteady gait and that tag gave the entire scene a distinctly amateurish vibe. If she intended to embody a femme fatale, a mix of seductress and dominant mistress, she clearly had a long way to go. On her underwear, right across the back, was a small green sticker that read, "Key C checked out." In my opinion, it was a rather fitting description of her backside, and frankly, more appropriate than the cheap-looking lingerie earlier in the living room. After greeting Roberto, Anna had shared a brief yet passionate kiss with her accountant lover. Then, without hesitation, she knelt down in front of him. As I stood there, watching her actions unfold, a wave of new emotions washed over me. To the humiliation I was already feeling, a faint spark of something else, curiosity, perhaps, began to mix with other unidentifiable emotions after a brief oral session, accompanied by her nasal snorting and exaggerated smacking noises that could have come straight out of a cheap 1970s adult film. They announced they were heading to the bedroom to move on to the main event, and that I was invited to watch. I politely declined, feeling I had already received more than enough of the cuckold experience for one day. To my surprise, even from the second floor, they managed to amplify their moans, gasps, and cries, apparently aiming to make this scene sound even more dramatic. Engage. Why yes, more. Keep going. Oh, you are amazing, and so on echoed from the bedroom. To my ears, it wasn't exactly enjoyable, but I realized this whole cuckolding thing wasn't just entertainment. They were doing it, at least partially, for my benefit. We were all just playing the roles assigned to us. I was supposed to suffer, and Anna planned to derive her pleasure from that. I sighed and retreated to the guest bedroom, which had now officially become the place where I was expected to spend my lonely nights. A proper space for the household cuckold, as Anna had so aptly described it that I half wondered if I would soon find some humiliating sign affixed to the door, something like, "Welcome to Cuckoldland." My fiancé had made it very clear that I was no longer to sully the bed where her alpha lover now reigns supreme, that I asked myself, what have I gotten myself into, and how long can I endure this? While this was an intriguing experience in its own way, and part of my mixed emotions included some arousal, I doubted I could sustain this for very long. In the weeks that followed, the lovers never met at Roberto's place. Every time, they arranged their meetings at our house, deliberately having sex in what used to be my bed. I understood perfectly well that meeting elsewhere would eliminate a crucial part of the game, my humiliation. Before heading out with him for their dates in the city, Anna would always dress up extravagantly at home, purposefully parading herself in front of me and showing off. Whenever Roberto arrived to pick her up, she would greet him enthusiastically, making sure I was there to see it. From time to time, my fiancée met with our friends and openly shared with anyone willing to listen that she now had a lover and that I had agreed to it. After such outings, she would return home and gleefully recount the experience to me, relishing in her taunting. At the end of the evening, Anna would retire to her bedroom, which had recently ceased to be ours, with great ceremony, her face lit with genuine satisfaction. Whenever they headed upstairs for another round of intimacy, I was invited to watch. Sometimes I stayed for a few minutes, but most of the time I didn't. Over time, the novelty of the cuckold experience began to fade. While I continued to feel complex and conflicting emotions, they no longer carried the same intensity as before. Anna, however, remained affectionate and loving. Several times a day, she offered to perform oral sex on me, but only when Roberto wasn't around. Roberto continued to act somewhat arrogant, but mostly just ignored me. I accepted Anna's suggestions for a while, but as time went on, my interest waned. Surprisingly, Anna didn't seem to notice this change at all. Tommy, I was engrossed in reading a fascinating book, paying little attention to their latest sex show. A few minutes earlier, Roberto had reached his climax, roaring like a water buffalo during mating season, a sound you'd expect to hear on one of those wildlife documentaries. Meanwhile, Anna squealed like a little girl. With each passing day, their behavior grew increasingly bizarre, as though they were trying to keep their game interesting. Roberto had long since claimed her last remaining virgin opening, so I didn't see many options left for them to raise the stakes or cause me any further pain. You know, sex with Roberto is incredibly exciting, Anna explained to me a little later. I'm sure you can hear it. My reactions with him are so much more intense than they ever were with you when we used to have sex. Well, you do seem to scream louder, I replied cautiously, steering clear of any comment on the truthfulness of her claim. Exactly, Anna nodded. She seemed very excited now, and it was clear that I was about to learn something new. I expected they had come up with some fresh twist to make their game of humiliation even more thrilling, and I wasn't disappointed. You see, as exhilarating as it is to completely surrender to this dominant man an incredible power, there's one thing that could make it all even more exciting, Anna began, her face displaying a slightly mysterious and anticipatory expression that I simply looked at her questioningly, politely waiting for the news. He calls it reprosex, she blurted out. What? Retrosex? You mean like how they did it in the old days? To be honest, I thought sex had remained relatively unchanged since the dawn of time, but apparently, there's always something new to learn. No, Tommy, not retro, but reprosex, Anna corrected, diving into an explanatory tone. As in reproduction, Roberto says the possibility of pregnancy will greatly enhance the sexual experience for all of us. I can't even describe how excited I am about this. It's such a thrill, she exclaimed enthusiastically, her eyes sparkling as she outlined the prospects ahead. Just imagine, every time I'm with him, there's a good chance I'll be able to conceive our first child. I've never felt such strong emotions as I did after I agreed to do this, even though I was still taking precautions at the time. Our first child? I repeated exactly, Tommy, yours and mine? Of course, Roberto will be the one to impregnate me, but the child will still be ours, she declared with complete sincerity. I see, I replied in a neutral tone. Of course, our second child can be conceived by you. By then, this whole game will be over, and I'll belong to you again, just as I promised, she added with a broad smile. I see, I repeated, I see. Is that all you have to say? My fiancé seemed a bit disappointed by my reaction. Well, yes, of course. I mean, in truth, I was slightly stunned by this news, unable to quickly find the right words. Well, I'm glad you're finding so much satisfaction in this. I finally managed to piece together a coherent response. Well, of course, Cookie, she said casually, with a self-satisfied smirk. That nickname still stunned my feelings a bit, so, when are you planning to start? I decided to ask, start, what do you mean? Anna looked at me, puzzled. When are you going to stop taking the pills? Oh, Bat, she said with a knowing grin. I already stopped, about 3 weeks ago. Oh, wow. So you might already be pregnant. Anna shook her head doubtfully, but then immediately lit up at the very thought. Clearly thrilled by the possibility. It's unlikely, but it could happen very soon. Isn't that exciting? Well, it was an exciting feeling, along with several other emotions. I had to admit, I felt a rush of adrenaline I hadn't experienced in weeks, as the so-called cuckold game had become increasingly dull. So in some twisted way, this new development gave it a certain sense of purpose. This game will end with the arrival of our first child, just remember that. After that, you'll no longer be a cuckold. In EVR again, Anna declared emphatically, punctuating her words with firm nods. You'll become a proud man again, my man. And I will too. I'll be yours again, only yours. We'll be so happy together. She practically glowed as she painted a rosy picture of our future. I can see how happy this makes you. I agreed. She confirmed this with a euphoric squeal. Just remember, Roberto agreed that I'll be yours forever again, only once my belly is truly big. Until then, I completely belong to him. Isn't that wonderful? Anna widened her eyes in admiration, clasping her fist to her chest that I nodded, signaling that I understood, smiled at her, and returned to my book. A few months later, 2 facts became clear. First, her belly was steadily growing. Second, Roberto had vanished one day without a trace point one day. Anna entered my room, to the nines and smiling expectantly. Tada, she exclaimed, throwing her arms into the air. Tada, I asked, confused. Yes, Tada, your loving wife has returned to you. Anna exclaimed joyfully. Well, technically, I know, she interrupted me. We're not married yet, but you're my fiancé, my man, and you always have been. And here I am, your woman again. Roberto has left the scene for good. Really? Yes, she nodded enthusiastically. And as I promised, I'm yours again, forever. So, your plan worked. You're actually. I let my gaze drop below her chest. All right, I know it was silly to even ask, considering the obvious swell of her belly pregnant. Yes, she chimed in with satisfaction, lovingly running her hands over her stomach. Isn't it wonderful, darling? We're going to be such proud parents. Anna tried to appear joyful, but to me, it didn't seem entirely genuine. In fact, noticing my lack of excitement, she suddenly grew anxious that I looked her straight in the eyes, then slowly let my gaze travel over her face and body. Suddenly, it felt as if I were standing before a stranger, that a woman stood before me. Did I like her? That was a good question. I didn't know the answer. Did I love her? I remembered that, yes, I had loved her once. Now, she was pregnant with another man's child, conceived as the result of a deliberate act of betrayal. She wanted to marry me. She expected to marry me. Had her plan worked? The silent pause stretching between us grew longer. Anna watched me, waiting for my reaction, her face showing a new, unfamiliar, and increasingly worried expression. This was the second turning point in our lives, and we both saw it with crystal clarity. Everything had changed, the clock had reset, and all decisions had to be made anew. She said hesitantly, her voice filled with uncertainty, an unusual tone for a girl who had spent months floating in the clouds of her own fantasies. Her insecurity only underscored the shift in power. Tom, I hope you've never doubted my love for you, she said hurriedly, breaking the silence after failing to get a reaction from me. This was just a brief deviation from the norm, an exciting experience before the start of our family life. Think of it like, well, marrying a single mother, except in my case, I don't know. Tom, please, say something. This puts you in quite a tricky position, doesn't it? I observed. Puts me in what? Why? No, I'm with you now. From this moment on, I'll never even look at another man. I've had my experience. It was a twisted adventure for both of us. But now, it's over. From now on, all those cuckold fantasies are behind us, she said, waving her hands for emphasis. Now her words were pouring out in a torrent, too loud and too fast. It's time to get back to living our old life and planning our wedding before my body starts to show too much, she said, pushing her belly forward. We'll meet with our friends often to show them that I'm your woman again, fully devoted only to you, my dear Tom. I gave Anna a skeptical look. You're pregnant, unmarried, and have a low-paying job. That sounds like a bit of a problem. Strangely enough, I was eerily calm in that moment. There was no need to fake it, it was exactly how I felt. I had a decision to make, and I wasn't going to rush, fully aware that I held all the cards. Why? What do you mean by saying I'm unmarried? My fiancé snapped. We'll change that very soon. After all, you're the love of my life, just as I am yours. You proposed to me, and I accepted. Yes, my job doesn't pay as well as yours, but we agreed that I'd become a stay-at-home mom anyway, remember? It seems like you think I'm still planning to marry you. I responded with a question of my own, this time not hiding the irony in my voice. Anna's expression told me she had the same doubts I did, but she was trying to mask them with feigned cheerfulness. What? What are you talking about? She said, shrugging her shoulders nonchalantly. Of course, you'll marry me, silly. With those words, she sweetly smiled and reached out her arms, moving toward me, clearly intending to kiss, hug, or something along those lines. Raising my hand, I quickly stopped her advance. And why exactly should I do that? I'm not saying I won't, but this isn't a simple decision. I'm weighing all the pros and cons. I informed her I once proposed to you, but since then, you've gained a lot of experience, both emotional and physical, and you've picked up some extra baggage too, I said, motioning toward her protruding belly. A clear sense of fear began to appear on Anna's once cheerful face as the harsh reality of her situation started to sink in. At this moment, it was absolutely critical for her to convince me to continue living according to her plans, but for that, she'd need to come up with some compelling reasons, and fast, alas. It seemed Anna didn't have a plan B. If I refused to marry her, she'd be left with nothing. We both understood the reckless gamble she had taken by getting pregnant with some idiot's child when I was the one who was supposed to take care of her. Especially since some unfortunate events had recently occurred with that idiot, making it impossible for him to return, though Anna didn't know that. But you agreed to our cuckold game that evening, she stammered, but greed? Not exactly, I shook my head. Even before our conversation, you had already cheated on me and publicly disrespected me. You decided to play cuckold regardless of how I felt about it, so our relationship ended that very night. If you remember, I told you this could permanently change our relationship, but you didn't believe me. Well, I stayed here out of curiosity. It was an interesting opportunity for me to observe what this bizarre cuckold nonsense is about, without actually participating in it myself. Maybe I was curious to see how you'd tighten the noose around your own neck. I chuckled, after what you did to me. And now, if you'll excuse me, I have a date with my girlfriend. Your? Who? At that moment, Anna looked so stunned. I almost worried she might faint. Yeah, this definitely wasn't her best evening. My girlfriend, I repeated calmly. Did you really think I'd stay celibate all this time? You're the one who decided to open up our relationship, so why shouldn't I enjoy some benefits from it too? Oh no, damn, she grimaced as if she'd just bitten into a sour lemon. Then suddenly, she perked up, clearly struck by a thought that she saw as a promising opportunity. Well, I'm going to tell her you're a cuckold, Anna declared triumphantly. I'll tell every woman you're interested in until you come back to me. So there. Oh, I said casually, waving my hand dismissively, don't worry about that. She already knows what you did. Can you imagine? When I told her, she laughed so hard she could barely breathe. You probably didn't notice, but I haven't touched you in months. Or did that escape your attention? Never mind, I just didn't want to cheat on her. Wah, oh my God, Anna stammered, looking completely lost. I had no idea. So, I guess you were seeing her while I was with Roberto. Yep, I confirmed. After all, you were spending 4 or 5 nights a week with him, plus most weekends. You didn't even notice that I wasn't in the guest bedroom all that time. So yeah, it was actually pretty easy. That much? Damn, I didn't even realize, she admitted, her shoulders slumping. I don't know, just so caught up, so wildly exhilarated by my own sense of power. Tina, and that idiot filled my head with all those damned ideas, and now it's all turned into a complete mess. Yes, that's for sure, I chuckled. I even felt a little sorry for her. Well, Just a little, of course, Tom. Do you think, is there any chance for us? Anna looked at me pleadingly, her gaze filled with both pain and hope. No, I shook my head. No, I don't think so. I had already made my decision, and it was well thought out and firm. I see, my fiancé, now my ex, sighed sadly. Tell your girlfriend never to do anything as foolish as I did. I envy her for the chance she has to be with you. I wish. The words froze on her lips before she shook her head. Never mind. That ship has sailed, hasn't it? It has, I confirmed with a nod. So, do you think you'll marry her? I plan to ask her tonight, and I'm more than confident she'll say yes. She's been hinting at it pretty strongly lately. I said with a smile that it wasn't long before it turned out I was right. Thanks to everyone who took the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed it, please consider liking and subscribing if you haven't already. Feel free to share your thoughts on the events in the comments below. Take care.